that for just a second. We'll talk a little more about this business of the aircraft and the fuel. We're trying to figure out why would a plane going from Newark to San Francisco, Boston to Los Angeles be involved in this? It could have been any plane, though, right?
It could have been, but when you consider the advantage to a terrorist, here you have a transnational flight. It's going to be a larger aircraft in each case, but, and this is the key, because we had speculated earlier, was there some additional explosives laden in these planes to cause these incredibly large explosions? It appears who's ever planned this has picked cross-country flights that would have the maximum amount of fuel you could carry on a domestic flight. Flights going from one end of the country to the other. The kind of jet that if you slammed into a building would ensure the maximum fire and explosion possible from any flight that you could have chosen. Again, Newark to San Francisco, Boston to LA, Dulles to Los Angeles, Washington to LA, Boston to LA. The planes that are being looked at in this attack today were apparently, or you could speculate, chosen to give the terrorists the very biggest bang for their effort.
And it's a very interesting point you make, because again, our assumptions tend to go when we see huge explosions like this. None of us understanding visually the power of explosives, that there were explosives on board, and so you're quite right, it may indeed have been the aircraft explosion.
I mean, John Nance could help us with this, but when you hear the amount of fuel, very flammable aeronautical fuel that's loaded onto a plane for a 3,000-mile trip or something, that's going to give you quite an explosion. Flight 800, which was an international flight, to those who saw it, was an incredible explosion.
John, if you'd sit at your station for a second, I'm just going to go and try to check one piece of information, and in that period of time, we're going to try to give you a little better sense of the disaster at the trade towers today. Here's something we've compiled, and we compile it as we go along.
I was standing next to One World Trade Center, and then all of a sudden I heard rumbling, and we all started running away from it. The glass like blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for like 20 seconds. And then I started seeing vaguely the street, and I just started walking, and my eyesight came back.
I see you're bloody. You have dust all over you.
Yeah, it was bad. It was like a dust storm or something. Like I couldn't see anything.
How badly are you hurt?
I have no idea.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
We just come out of Tower 1. We were walking towards Broadway. They're saying, move along, move along, move along. I looked up. As soon as we got across the street, I looked up. I saw the tower start to buckle. I just turned and ran, ducked down, put a jacket over my head. 3 or 4 of us huddled together, and it was just black everywhere.
Were you covered? Were you hit with debris?
No. But I mean, I was ducked behind a subway cover, so I put with the jacket over, the 3 of us, all of us huddled together. There was, dust and whatnot everywhere, but it was.
Come down. The second everyone's being asked to get down, come down.
Can't even look at it, because all I can see are people. I don't see a building. I see people. People hurt. Children without mothers and fathers tonight.
If you're just joining us, you probably already know the World Trade Center towers, the Twin Towers, the New York landmarks have collapsed and are gone. The Pentagon has been hit by an airplane. A series of hijackings apparently today at the root of this. What we know is hundreds, if not thousands, are injured, no count on the deceased yet, and that the investigation, a massive investigation, is just beginning to unfold.
But John, I stepped aside there, among other things, the moment to try to get some sort of sense from people who talk to, because as soon as this happens, people begin to think about a response, and we don't expect a response to come in the immediate future by any means. But I was just talking to Charlie Gibson from Good Morning America, and he'd been thinking about the same thing, that the response to this from the United States is going to have to be massive. They have to accomplish something in some way, because so much of the response to terrorism before by a large nation such as this, which is not impotent, but very limited in its capacity to operate at this kind of level. You were mentioning earlier the attacks against Osama bin Laden's training camps in Afghanistan. In retrospect, They spent, as you pointed out, more than $1 million per cruise missile. I've forgotten how many they sent. They didn't get anything. They didn't get anything. They didn't do anything. So it's an enormous challenge for a powerful nation to respond in an effective way. And the Pentagon is still burning, and today the World Trade Center towers have gone. Dianne Sawyer is down in Times Square at the moment, and among other things, I think has been trying to get some grasp of the number of casualties involved. And it must be very difficult, Dianne.
It's impossible, Peter, no matter how many people you call. And of course, no matter what the facts we get now, one can only imagine what the facts will be later. I want to give you a sense of what it's like here in Times Square right now. Because if you look outside, we have hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of people standing outside, just stopping still, a kind of respectful witness, looking up at the screens where we're broadcasting the pictures. They can't hear the sound. They are simply looking at the wordless horror and standing to show, in a way, respect. And I want to show you something else, because people have been sent home from Times Square, and across the way, the construction workers who were building the Toys R Us building next door to us just hung their signs outside. God bless America, and pray for families and victims. And we can only, of course, add to that that as crisply as we try to report what's happening here today, we join them. And this is not just another story, even for reporters who've been trained to do this for so long. A few things to add since this morning. We were on the air, of course, live when suddenly we get word of that first explosion at the World Trade Center, the first building. And initially, of course, we didn't know if it was an accident. We didn't know what had happened. And then we were on the air live when the second plane came in and the second plane hit. And I want to show you now, this is what we were seeing live on the air. And as you've expressed before, Peter, the combination of disbelief and horror and simple prayer for somebody to save the people who were inside that building is all anybody can do, as an entire network is broadcasting live something so unimaginable. I have talked, as you all have, and as George Stephanopoulos reported, to the people who were inside as these scenes were taking place. We now see the first collapse, which of course took place about 10 a.m. Eastern time, and then it would be about 28 minutes later that we would see the second collapse of the second building. And while we're watching the scene, each person desperate to stop this tape and go and do something. All we can do is relive the horror each time we see it. I have talked to people who are inside the building, one of them, Fran Martin, who is the aunt of someone who works here at ABC, and she was saying that the first experience inside the building was that earthquake-like feeling a number of people have mentioned, and then something else in an eerie, silent, kind of mournful foliage. You saw paper just wafting out in all directions, and it was so mysterious to everyone. They couldn't imagine what had happened. The paper was scattering, and we've now read some 3 miles out, way across the river, the paper from those floors. As they came down the stairs, we're told that people were remarkably calm, were remarkably respectful of each other as they were making their way down, even though a number of them had lived through that bombing 8 years ago. A number of them remembered what it was when the bomb went off in the basement of the World Trade Center. And of course, as we now know, if the cyanide gas had not vaporized in those bombs, that it would have been a cataclysm even beyond what was experienced then. So they could all relive it as they were making their way down. Now we're watching the scenes as the building is collapsing and people are running from it. People are covered with this kind of spectral suit from the building's collapse itself. I want to point out again, and you've talked about it too, Peter, all the firefighters were immediately called on duty. All the firefighters immediately raced in from wherever they were to help out, all the emergency medical service personnel. This was a great display of human concern and human consideration. And you've mentioned before, we have this report that 200 firefighters are now missing, and yet they have done everything they can. Every hospital is open, every hand is on deck, every doctor is standing by in the city of New York with all this courage and struggle and still heartbreak out there in the streets right now. So that's it from Times Square, Peter.
Thank you very much, Dianne. I remember